In this podcast episode, Joe Rogan welcomes two guests, comedian and political commentator Dave Smith and author and political commentator Douglas Murray. The conversation covers a wide range of topics, from the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East to the implications of U.S. foreign policy. The episode opens with Rogan expressing his desire for rational discourse in a time when public discussions often devolve into shouting matches. He contrasts this with the typical media landscape, where debates are often characterized by chaos and lack of substantive dialogue. Rogan emphasizes the importance of having guests with differing viewpoints, believing that it can lead to more meaningful conversations. Both Smith and Murray agree, highlighting the need for civil discourse, especially on contentious issues like foreign policy and social justice. Murray points out that the current media environment often rewards sensationalism over reasoned debate. He notes that this trend has led to a culture where people are more inclined to shout their opinions rather than engage in thoughtful discussions. Smith adds that this environment can create a feedback loop where extreme views gain traction, further polarizing public opinion. The trio discusses how this dynamic can stifle genuine understanding and compromise, which are essential for a functioning democracy. As the conversation shifts to the Israel-Palestine conflict, Rogan asks both guests about their perspectives on the ongoing violence. Murray provides a historical context, explaining that the conflict has deep roots and is often oversimplified in public discourse. He emphasizes that the recent escalation of violence, particularly the events of October 7, 2023, where Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, has led to a significant humanitarian crisis. Smith acknowledges the complexity of the situation, noting that while he sympathizes with the plight of the Palestinian people, he also recognizes the right of Israel to defend itself. He argues that the actions of Hamas cannot be excused and that the group's tactics have led to devastating consequences for both Israelis and Palestinians. The discussion highlights the moral dilemmas faced by both sides, as well as the challenges of finding a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The conversation then delves into U.S. foreign policy, particularly its role in the Middle East. Rogan asks both guests about the implications of American intervention in foreign conflicts. Murray argues that U.S. actions have often been misguided, leading to unintended consequences that exacerbate existing tensions. He cites the Iraq War as a prime example of how poorly conceived interventions can destabilize entire regions. Smith adds that the U.S. has a history of supporting authoritarian regimes when it suits its interests, which complicates its moral standing in advocating for democracy abroad. He points out that this hypocrisy can lead to resentment and distrust among the populations of countries where the U.S. intervenes. The discussion raises important questions about the ethical responsibilities of powerful nations and the consequences of their actions on global stability. Rogan, Smith, and Murray discuss the role of media in shaping public perception of conflicts. They agree that mainstream media often presents a skewed narrative that can influence public opinion and policy decisions. Murray argues that sensationalist reporting can lead to a lack of understanding about the complexities of international relations, while Smith emphasizes the need for independent journalism that holds power accountable. The guests also touch on the rise of alternative media platforms, which they believe can provide a more nuanced perspective on global events. They discuss how these platforms can challenge the dominant narratives presented by traditional media outlets, allowing for a broader range of voices to be heard. However, they also acknowledge the risks associated with misinformation and the need for critical thinking in consuming news. The discussion shifts to the impact of social media on public discourse and political engagement. Rogan notes that platforms like Twitter and Facebook have changed the way people communicate and share information. Smith argues that while social media can amplify important voices, it can also lead to the spread of misinformation and polarization. Murray adds that social media has created an environment where outrage often trumps reasoned debate. He points out that the algorithms driving these platforms tend to favor sensational content, which can distort public perception of issues. The guests discuss the challenges of navigating this landscape and the importance of fostering healthy online communities that encourage constructive dialogue. As the conversation continues, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza becomes a focal point. Murray describes the dire conditions faced by civilians in the region, emphasizing the need for immediate humanitarian aid. He argues that while Israel has the right to defend itself, it must also consider the impact of its actions on innocent civilians. Smith echoes this sentiment, highlighting the suffering of the Palestinian people and the need for a balanced approach to the conflict. He stresses that the international community must work towards a solution that addresses the needs of both Israelis and Palestinians. The discussion underscores the importance of empathy and understanding in addressing complex humanitarian issues. Rogan, Smith, and Murray discuss the future of the Middle East and the potential for peace in the region. They acknowledge that achieving lasting peace will require difficult compromises from both sides. Murray argues that the international community must play a role in facilitating dialogue and supporting initiatives that promote coexistence. Smith adds that the younger generation in both Israel and Palestine has the potential to drive change, but they must be given the opportunity to do so. He emphasizes the importance of education and dialogue in fostering understanding between the two peoples. The guests express cautious optimism that, despite the challenges, a path to peace is still possible. The conversation touches on the importance of understanding history in shaping current events. Murray argues that a nuanced understanding of historical context is essential for making sense of contemporary conflicts. He emphasizes that many of the issues facing the Middle East today are rooted in historical grievances and misunderstandings. Smith agrees, noting that history can provide valuable lessons for policymakers. He argues that a failure to learn from the past can lead to repeated mistakes and exacerbate existing tensions. The guests discuss the need for a more comprehensive approach to history that acknowledges the complexities of different narratives. Rogan, Smith, and Murray engage in a philosophical discussion about the ethics of war. They explore the moral implications of military intervention and the responsibilities of nations in conflict. Murray argues that while war is often necessary, it must be conducted with a clear understanding of its consequences. Smith adds that the ethical considerations surrounding war are often overlooked in public discourse. He emphasizes the need for transparency and accountability in military actions, particularly when civilian lives are at stake. The discussion raises important questions about the moral responsibilities of governments and the impact of their decisions on human lives. As the podcast nears its conclusion, the guests reflect on the importance of dialogue in addressing complex issues. Rogan emphasizes that open conversations can lead to greater understanding and empathy. Murray agrees, noting that dialogue is essential for finding common ground and working towards solutions. Smith adds that fostering a culture of dialogue requires courage and a willingness to engage with differing viewpoints. He argues that the current political climate often discourages honest conversations, which can hinder progress. The guests express hope that by promoting dialogue, they can contribute to a more constructive discourse around contentious issues.